Hi again then guys, and welcome to episode 51 of GT Masters, the review series on Gran Turismo in particular for the GT class race cars and various subcategories within that, be it GT3, GT2, GT1, even some N24 style machines or GT24 cars. And this particular vehicle, as with the previous couple of weeks and many more weeks to come, is focusing on the new GT race cars of Gran Turismo Sport in particular. And of course we have a combination of real-world machines and Polyphony Digital Originals, and this is one such vehicle. It's a Polyphony Digital Original race car, aka a fictional machine, and it's one of my personal favourite cars to debut so far on Gran Turismo Sport. Now funnily enough, I'm not a huge fan of the road-going Alfa Romeo 4C. I know a lot of people love that car. For me personally, I'm not a fan of smaller sports cars generally speaking. The 8C I'm a big fan of, especially the open top. The 4C not so much. It certainly has great performance, especially for its power, and it's known for being a small bundle of power with a very low weight and great performance. So does that carry over to the racing world with this fictional Group 3 machine? Well, first of all, on the point of it being a Group 3 car, there is also a Group 4 version. We don't currently have the road car, but what we do have are both the Group 4 and Group 3 machines. Now, we will be featuring a Group 4 version in a future episode, but for now, of course, we're focusing on the Group 3 car. Now, by definition, as all Group 3 cars are to each other, and as all Group 4 cars are to each other, they're designed to have their own unique flavour, for sure, but also to be, of course, direct competitors to each other, so that no one car, ideally, is just infinitely better than everything else. You don't really want to have an OP vehicle. There can definitely be cars which will lead the pack. The Jag F-Type, the McLaren 650S, they're perfect examples of that. So does this have that, or is it more a mainstream, if you will, Group 3 car with a good level of performance but not necessarily class leading, or is it potentially a bad one? Well, with the 4C base model, it would be pretty difficult for it to be a bad car. It's small, it's light, and it's fast, even without much power. So logically speaking, you'd assume that the racing version would be similar. And in some ways, it is. Of course, the size is still pretty small, even with the huge racing body kit. It's still a relatively compact car, and the engine, which we're not told the capacity, but it is a turbo unit, puts out 529 horsepower at 8,000 RPM. So the engine does like to be worked hard, not too surprisingly for a race car. It also happens to sound pretty good, and it's not the most powerful of Group 3 machines, but potentially, given the size and the potential weight of the car, it could be pretty good. Perhaps surprisingly though, but not too surprising once you think about it, the weight actually isn't that much lower than most of the other Group 3 machines, and in fact it's not the lightest of Group 3 cars. It weighs 1,171 kilos, which is actually exactly the same as the Renault RS01. So it's not that light. It must have a significant amount of ballast, given that it does weigh as much as the others, and that's not surprising at all. As I said, once you think about that, it's fairly obvious. Of course they're going to make it heavier, because otherwise with that much power in a car which is, say, 200, 300, 400 kilos lighter, it would just have too much of an advantage. That being said, that puts this car in a relatively unique position compared to most of the other cars in the class. Because if you think about it, many of them, the Audi R8, the BMW M6, the Mitsubishi Evo even, the Subaru Impreza, they start as much heavier machines than the Group 3 regulations dictate. The 4C is one of the very rare models in the class, at least so far, that is not. It's much lighter. So having that amount of extra ballast on a car that's not designed to be that heavy is a drastically different thing to taking weight out of a car that was heavier to begin with. So how does it cope with that extra weight? Well, I have to say it copes remarkably well. It does dampen the car's performance compared to what it would be were it around 900 kilos, for instance, as you'd expect, but the weight is still low, much lower than, say, a GT3 machine on Gran Turismo 6. The horsepower per tonne is a competitive 452, and although we're not told stuff like the price, you can assume it's going to be in the same kind of ballpark as many of the other cars here. We still don't know, as far as I'm aware, whether or not the cars will have a blanket price, JGTC style, on Gran Turismo, or if some will vary. I personally am of the mind that they'll probably vary, but if they are like Super GT cars, all 750 grand, that'll be interesting. I personally don't think that'll be the way, but if they are different, I wouldn't be at all surprised if this Alfa Romeo is a little bit more affordable than some of the others, because the fact is it's not quite as quick in a straight line as some of the other cars. It's not as quick as a 650S, it's not as quick as an M6. It is as quick as, say, an Evo or an Impreza, and some others as well, so it's definitely still competitive, but it's not really a straight line machine anyway. It's much more of a cornering focused vehicle, and that is undoubtedly where this car shines. Because although it's not the best handling car in the Group 3 class, I definitely wouldn't say that it is. In fact, it's a little bit slippery. What it does offer is a great beginner's package. And this is actually something which I mentioned quite a while ago in one of the parts of my Gran Turismo Sport review series, that the 4C, I believe, is going to be a car which less experienced drivers are going to use, or at least enjoy using, to get a hang of these quicker machines, especially for younger people who are maybe new to the Gran Turismo franchise as a whole in years to come, who play Gran Turismo Sport first, or maybe very soon into their Gran Turismo playing experience, and get their hands on a 4C maybe before something like a 650S, or a Corvette Group 3 machine, or a Ferrari 458 GT3. And that's not a bad thing, because it's a much more beginner-friendly machine. It's smaller, it's more compact, and even though technically it's not lighter than the other cars, I would say that it does feel lighter than many of the other cars. And of course, with balance of performance, that affects power and weight drastically anyway, given the track and the track requirements. So overall, this is a vehicle which I think is a great addition to the Gran Turismo roster. The road car is probably going to be in the game. I'm not sure if we've seen it in trailers yet, but it's pretty much a dead cert given that we have both the Group 4 and Group 3 machines already in. And so far, both the Group 4 and Group 3 cars are really nice vehicles. So that's it for this pick overall, and I'll see you guys next time. But for now, as always, thanks for watching.